You know that feeling when you finally close a door after a long day of being around people and the silence hits you like a physical wave? You stand there in your hallway, key still in your hand, and for a split second, you do not even remember who you are. You have spent the last 8 hours nodding, smiling, laughing at jokes that were not funny, and absorbing the emotional energy of everyone around you. Now the noise is gone, but your brain is still vibrating. It's a strange phenomenon. You would think that after being overwhelmed by social interaction, being alone would feel like instant relief, like taking off tight shoes. But sometimes it does not feel like relief at all. Sometimes it feels heavy, it feels like a crash, or even worse, it feels like you are suddenly a stranger to yourself. Have you ever noticed that being alone feels completely different depending on how you got there? There's the solitude you choose when you wake up early on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee and the world is quiet. That feels peaceful. That feels like freedom. But then there's the solitude that is forced upon you after your social battery has been drained to zero. That solitude feels raw. It feels vulnerable. If you've ever laid in bed staring at the ceiling with your clothes still on, unable to move even though you're desperate to relax, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But here's the thing. That crash is not just you being dramatic, and it's not just you being tired. There's a hidden psychology behind why solitude feels so intense after social overload, and it tells us something profound about how your brain processes the world. Let's talk about the first type of reaction to this social hangover. We can call this the decompression crash. This is the person who holds it together perfectly while they're in public. If this is you, then you're probably the listener in your friend group. You're the one observing everything, tracking the mood of the room, making sure everyone else is comfortable. Your brain is running 1,000 calculations a minute, reading micro expressions, checking your tone of voice, and filtering out the background noise of music or traffic or other conversations. You're high functioning in the chaos. In fact, people might think you're an extrovert because you're so good at it. You're on, you're performing. But the moment you leave that environment, the drop is steep. It's almost biological. Your brain has been flooded with dopamine and cortisol trying to keep up with the stimulation, and when the stimulus is removed, your brain chemistry takes a nosedive. You get home and you sit on the edge of your bed and you just stare at the wall. You're not thinking about anything. You're not planning your tomorrow. You're just rebooting. It feels like your operating system has crashed and you're waiting for the blue screen to clear. For this type of person, the silence after social overload feels heavy because your brain is struggling to switch gears. You've been in a state of high alert, external focus. Shifting back to internal focus requires energy that you simply don't have left. It's why you might find yourself scrolling through your phone mindlessly, not actually reading anything, just needing a low level of stimulation to bridge the gap between the chaos you just left and the quiet you are now in. You're not ready to be alone with your thoughts yet because your thoughts are too loud. You need a buffer. If you recognize this sitting on the bed stare, then you're likely someone with high empathy or high sensory processing sensitivity. You absorb the world deeply, so when you step away from it, the absence of that weight feels disorienting. Then there's a completely different experience, which is much more cerebral. Let's look at the social autopsy. This is for the overthinkers. Maybe this is you. You leave the party or the meeting or the dinner, and the moment you're alone, the replay button gets hit. Instead of relaxing, your brain immediately starts scanning the last few hours for errors. Did I talk too much? Was that joke offensive? Why did I laugh so loud when nobody else was laughing? The silence around you becomes a canvas for your anxiety. For this type of person, being alone after social overload feels dangerous. When you were in the moment, you were distracted. You were reacting in real time. But now that you're alone, the protective distraction of the crowd is gone, and you're left with your inner critic. And that critic is loud. You might find yourself replaying a single interaction over and over again, analyzing the tone of someone's voice or the way they looked away when you were speaking. The silence does not feel like rest. It feels like an interrogation room. Psychologically, this happens because your social identity is fragile in that moment. We all wear masks when we're around others. We project the version of ourselves that we think is acceptable or likable. When we're socially overloaded, that mask starts to slip, or it feels heavy and uncomfortable. When you're finally alone, you're trying to reconcile the person you were pretending to be with the person you actually are. The gap between those two creates anxiety. You feel like a fraud, or you worry that people saw through you. So the silence is not empty. It's filled with the echoes of your own performance. If you find yourself pacing your living room or having imaginary arguments in the shower after a social event, this is the category you fall into. You're not just tired, you're processing the gap between your social self and your true self. Now, imagine a third scenario. This one is less about anxiety and more about emptiness. We can call this the social identity void. This happens often to people who are natural chameleons. You're the kind of person who matches the energy of the room. If you are with loud people, you become loud. If you are with serious intellectual people, you become serious and intellectual. You're incredibly adaptable. It's a superpower, really, because it makes people like you. You make them feel seen because you reflect them back to themselves. But here's the catch. When you leave the group and you're suddenly alone, there's nobody left to reflect. You walk into your quiet apartment and you feel a strange sense of hollowness. It's not sadness exactly, it's just a blankness. You might ask yourself, what do I actually want to do right now? And realize you have no idea. Do I like this music, or did I just say I liked it because my friends were playing it? Do I actually want to eat this food, or is it just what everyone else was ordering? For the chameleon, being alone after social overload feels like disappearing. The social stimulation provided you with a structure and a script. Without it, you have to generate your own identity from scratch, and right now, you're too exhausted to do that. This feeling can be terrifying. It's why some people immediately turn on the television or call another friend the second they leave a gathering. They can't bear the weight of their own formlessness. They need an external input to tell them who they are. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own home after a night out, this is why. You gave so much of yourself away to others that you kept nothing for yourself. But there's a twist here. There's another type of person who experiences this transition in a totally different way. For them, the silence is not heavy and it's not anxious, it's euphoric. Let's call this the prisoner release. This is the true introvert who has learned to survive in an extroverted world but resents every second of the performance. You're at the family gathering or the networking event and you're polite, you say the right things, you smile at the baby pictures, you nod at the politics talk, but inside your head, there's a countdown clock ticking. You're calculating exactly how many minutes until you can politely excuse yourself. When this person finally gets alone, it feels like taking a breath of air after being underwater for 2 minutes. The relief is so intense, it's almost like a high. You get into your car and the silence is delicious. You might even let out a physical sigh or a laugh. For you, the social overload was a cage. The voices of other people felt like intrusive thoughts crowding out your own mind. When you're finally alone, your brain expands to fill the space. You feel smarter, you feel funnier, you feel like yourself again. However, even for this type, there is a danger. The danger is that the relief is so good it becomes addictive. You start to view the world outside as hostile. You start to view other people not as connections but as thieves who are stealing your energy. You might start declining invitations not because you're busy but because you're protecting that feeling of euphoria that comes from total control over your environment. The silence becomes a fortress, and while it feels safe inside a fortress, it can also become a prison of its own making. If you find yourself driving home with a massive smile on your face simply because you don't have to talk to anyone anymore, you're definitely in this category. You thrive in the recovery, but you have to be careful not to fall in love with the isolation. Let's dig a little deeper into the biology of why this switch is so jarring. Why does your body physically hurt sometimes when you transition from noise to quiet? It has to do with how our brains process threat and safety. For our ancestors, being alone was dangerous. If you were separated from the tribe, you were vulnerable to predators. So deep in our primitive brain, solitude can trigger a low alarm system. When you're with people, even if it's exhausting, your brain registers safety in numbers. When you leave that group, especially after a high intensity, your nervous system has to decide if you're safe. If you're already stressed or anxious, the sudden silence can be interpreted by your amygdala as a threat. The silence is too quiet. It's the silence of the woods before the tiger jumps out. This is why you might feel jumpy or unable to settle down. Your body is still vibrating with the energy of the crowd because it's trying to keep you ready for anything. It takes time for your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, to kick in and tell your body that the danger is over. This transition is even harder in the modern world because we're never truly alone anymore. Even when we leave the party, we have our phones, we have the internet, so we never actually let our brains hit zero. We go from physical social overload to digital social overload. We leave the real conversation and immediately open social media to see what other people are doing. We deny ourselves the very recovery we need. We're terrified of the boredom that comes with true decompression. Think about the last time you were truly bored. Not scrolling, not watching, not reading, just sitting. It's uncomfortable, right? It feels wrong. But that discomfort is where the healing happens. That's where your brain sorts through the memories of the day and decides what to keep and what to throw away. When we skip that stage, when we try to numb the social hangover with more distraction, we just prolong the exhaustion. So how do you recognize which type you are in the moment? Pay attention to your first instinct when the door closes. Do you collapse? Do you panic and analyze? Do you feel empty? Or do you feel a rush of joy? If you're the type who collapses, you need to treat your sensory system like a recovering muscle. You need dim lights. You need soft fabrics. You need to reduce the input to absolute zero. Don't turn on the TV. Just exist for 10 minutes. Let the static clear. If you're the analyzer, the one doing the social autopsy, you need distraction, but a specific kind. You need a task that requires focus, but no emotion. Organize a drawer. Wash the dishes by hand. Play a simple logic game. You need to occupy the part of your brain that is trying to rewrite history so that it can calm down. You can't just sit in the silence, because the silence is where the voices are.
If you are the one who feels the identity void, the emptiness, you need to reconnect with your physical self. Take a hot shower, eat something with a strong flavor. Listen to music that you loved when you were a teenager. Remind yourself of who you are when nobody is watching. You need to anchor yourself back in your own reality. And if you are the euphoric loner, enjoy it, but challenge yourself. Ask yourself if you are running towards solitude or running away from connection. The relief is real, but make sure it does not turn into avoidance. There is one more layer to this that we often ignore. It is the feeling of guilt. Many of us feel guilty for needing to be alone. We are told that humans are social creatures and that we should want to be around our friends and family. So when we feel that desperate need to escape, we judge ourselves. We think there is something wrong with us. We think we are bad friends or antisocial. This guilt makes the solitude feel even worse. It adds a layer of shame to the exhaustion. But here's the reality. The need for solitude after social overload is not a rejection of other people. It is a preservation of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. That is a cliche because it is true. When you are socially overloaded, you are not actually connecting with people anymore. You're just surviving them. You are going through the motions. By stepping away and embracing that heavy silence, you are recharging your ability to be a good friend, a good partner, and a good human being. Maybe you are the person who sits in the car for 20 minutes before going into the house because you need that airlock between the world and your family. Maybe you are the person who wakes up an hour before everyone else just to hear the coffee maker gurgle in peace. These are not quirks. These are survival mechanisms. The next time you hit that wall, the next time the noise feels like sandpaper on your brain and you finally step into the quiet, do not fight the feeling. Do not try to fix it immediately. Let the silence be heavy for a minute. Let the crash happen. It's just your brain realizing it's safe enough to stop running. It's funny how much time we spend trying to be better at socializing. We read books on how to make friends and influence people. We try to be more charismatic, more outgoing, more present. But we rarely teach ourselves how to be better at being alone. We treat solitude like a waiting room for life, a place we sit until the next interesting thing happens. But solitude is an event in itself. It is the other half of the equation. If you don't know how to be alone, you will always be a slave to the people around you. You will depend on them for your regulation, for your identity, and for your worth. The social hangover is your body telling you that the balance is off. It is an invitation to come back home to yourself. So, which one are you? Are you the one staring at the wall waiting for the reboot? Are you the one replaying the conversation from 3 hours ago? Or are you the one driving home with the radio off, smiling in the dark? Maybe you're a mix of all of them, depending on the day. Pay attention to that moment the door closes today. Listen to the silence. It has something to tell you about who you are when the performance ends. And trust me, the version of you that exists in the quiet is just as important as the version of you that lights up the room. Maybe even more important, because that's the one that has to live with you forever.